Chapter 7. I woke the next morning replete and relaxed. I hadn't felt this good in a long time, and I'd missed it. I had a pretty easy day, nothing stressing or any more tiring than usual, and I was thankful I would be able to keep the relaxed feeling all day long, at least until dinner time. Devin and I arrived just before 6, the time Bill had given Devin when he'd confirmed the night before. I rang the bell and wasn't surprised to see Terry, one of Bill's bodyguards, answer the door. The Aniquitos is busy at the moment, but he said to have you wait in the office. Terry nodded at Devin, then looked at me. You want me to take you back? No need. I grinned at him. I know the way. I led Devin down the short hall into the long, narrow room that Bill used for an office, and we made ourselves at home. Bill appeared in the doorway several minutes later and took a seat in one of the black leather chairs opposite the sofa where Devin and I sat together. Thanks for coming early, he said. I was hoping you'd fill me in on what happened when you went to Duncan. He was talking about the trip to pick up Bryson Jessup's body. It was right where he said it would be, about 60 feet down an old abandoned mine shaft several miles outside of town. No complications? Devin shook his head. It went pretty smoothly, all things considered. I took plenty of men with us, and Brandon didn't even look at anyone sideways. All things considered? He lifted one brow. Devin shrugged one shoulder. The body's in pretty bad shape. Caden had to bag him in pieces, but we got him. Bill blinked. All right, that's good. Have you figured out how to dispose of what's left? I've got a plan. We're gonna have that big party out at Ethan's ranch next weekend, and when we're done there, we won't have anything left to worry about. Bill was quiet a moment. Bill's wife Karen appeared in the doorway. How are things going in here? She moved into the room and leaned one hip against the side of the chair where Bill sat. I smiled, glad to see her. Pretty good, Devin said. I was just getting ready to tell your mate that we need to consider recruiting more enforcers. Oh. Her eyebrows lifted. How come? We were already short when I took over after losing Troy and West. I've been counting my joining as replacing one of them. He turned to look at Bill while he continued. On top of being short to start with, we've added duties. Nickie's got a guard and we're keeping someone on Brandon 24/7. We're spread thin. I don't know what we're gonna do if one of the team has some kind of emergency or gets hurt. I see your point. Bill sat back and folded his hands together over his chest. I'll put the word out to the other packs in the council that we're looking for a couple new wolves to serve as enforcers. Why wolves? I asked, looking back and forth between the Aniquitos and Electo. Bill looked at me, a crease between his brows. Because wolves guard wolves, that's just the way it is. But why? I help any non-shifter, I don't care what their animal form is. I paused. This could be a chance to reach out to some of the other groups and make connections. I really hadn't thought much about other animal forms before the Guidry twins had shown up. They weren't my first encounter with non-wolf shifters, but they'd made an impression. Karen frowned. A few months ago, when I went to Yuma, Natalie was both wolf and bear. I continued without waiting for a response. These guys who've come to see me now, they're fox. If we open the enforcer positions up to any shifter, welcome whoever wants to come into the pack, we strengthen our position. Not only among the wolves, but with everyone. Bill looked at me in silence a moment. I knew from experience he was considering my argument. You're right. I will tell the council that the request isn't restricted to wolves. Anyone can apply and we'll see what we get. Devin grinned. They'll still have to test to be accepted, but it could be fun to have a tiger or a bear on the team. It'll keep the rest of us on our toes. Bill nodded at Devin, then looked back to me. Speaking of the men who came to see you. What about them? They were here this morning. And I like them, he said, shifting his attention to his wife. Is dinner going to be ready in the next few minutes? She shook her head. We've got some time yet then? We do. Bill turned back to Devon and I. Give me your impression of the Guidry twins. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly, giving myself a chance to gather my thoughts. I didn't spend more than 20 minutes with them. I don't know how much I'll be able to tell you. Humor me. I lifted one shoulder in a deferent shrug. I recounted the entire meeting, ending with, they were polite. Beau did most of the talking, but Besson, the one that doesn't shift, didn't hesitate to speak up or answer questions when asked. But he was asking because he'd heard something in my voice when I'd called about them. I'd even heard it myself. There was just something not right about the pair. But they came to see me before they paid their respects to you. That rubs me wrong. You've done that, seen the non-shifter before going to the local Anikitos. Karen seemed to be playing devil's advocate here, and I got the feeling they were trying to make a point. I did, when we went to Yuma, but only when I had legitimate business with her. Granted, it was business I'd created so I could meet her, but it was still legitimate, and I didn't make the offer to her without checking with the Anikitos first. Approaching me before they've met with you, even I know that's a breach of protocol. It is. Though the breach can be excused if we wish. Because they're not wolves, they wouldn't necessarily need to pay their respect. The exception is that they came to town to see one of my pack on Kitsune business. It's up to us whether we forgive the breach or push for some sort of restitution. He fell silent. I've got a problem with all this, aside from the protocol nonsense. Devon spoke up. I knew he didn't have a lot of use for the social aspect of it all. He was more concerned with other things. What's that? Karen asked. We have no idea how long we've had two unknown shifters in town. If they hadn't come to us, we'd still have no clue they're here. It's a huge security problem. Bill blinked, processing what Devon meant. All right. Any ideas how to take care of the issue? I'm still working on it. I'll let you know as soon as I have a plan, but I wanted you to be aware of my concerns. I'll see what I can come up with, but security isn't my field, so I'm not sure how helpful I'll be. I'll be glad for all the help you can to offer. It's not going to be a small job. There's a lot of people around, and not all of them here in town. They discussed the visitors and how to solve the security problem for a while, until Karen looked at the clock on the wall. Looks like dinner should be about ready. Do we want to move into the dining room? Nickie, will you come help me in the kitchen a moment? Sure, I gave Devon a quick kiss, stood and followed her. In the kitchen, she went to the stove and pulled out a large roaster. How have you been doing, dear? She set the pan on the island across from the stove and slowly pulled off the foil. All right, I said, a little hesitant. I didn't know what she wanted. It might just be to check on me, but she might be fishing for something else. How are you handling married life? She seemed to just want to check on me in private while she finished getting dinner on the table. I could handle that. I had never been quite as close to Karen as I had been with Bill, but that was mostly because I would come with Dad when he visited with Bill. Sometimes Karen was around, sometimes not. It's not much different than before we got married. We were already mated and living together. Marriage just made it legal. She gave me an indulgent smile. I know, but still, it's a little different, isn't it? A little, I acknowledged. I'd miscarried only about a week after the wedding, so really it was a lot different, but I didn't want to talk about it. She took a deep breath and let it out in a rush. She seemed a little frustrated that I wasn't opening up to her, but then, I hadn't opened up to my own mother. I didn't see why she would be that much different. How are you doing with your shielding? She tried a different subject. Pretty good, I haven't had any leaks in quite a while. I'd gotten so used to being able to shut it all off that, at first, I was a little distressed I couldn't do the same to Devon, but now I can't imagine not always having him in the corner of my mind. A mating link does take a little getting used to, but once you've got one, you can't imagine losing it. A sharp ache shot through my chest at the thought of losing Devon. Yeah, I said. You all right? Devon's voice was soft inside my head. He must have caught the echo of what I'd felt. Yeah, I'm fine. You sure? I can make apologies, and we can go home if you'd like. They'll understand. No, I'm good. I promise. I pushed a wave of happiness and contentment down the link to him and looked back up to see Karen watching me. Is everything all right? She echoed my mate's concern. It felt good to know there were so many people who cared about me. I gave her what I hoped was a reassuring smile. It's fine. Is there anything I can help with? Just carrying these into the other room. She motioned to several pans and bowls sitting on the island. They hadn't been there before. She must have gotten them ready to go while I was talking to Devon. Together, we carried the dishes into the dining room and rejoined the men for the rest of the evening. The next day, I opted to go out during my lunch hour to go see Alexis. I didn't bother to call ahead because I knew that unless something came up to call her away, she tried to stay close to the clinic. It wasn't an official medical clinic, but instead for the pack in case someone got hurt and needed her help. Injuries weren't uncommon with us, especially among the teenagers. The clinic was supplied with everything she might need to treat most things. We didn't bother with the front of the house. Instead, Gavin parked in the small parking area behind the back fence, and we went in the gate there. I opened the door to the guest house and let us both in. The reception area was empty, so I moved deeper. I was familiar with the clinic because I'd spent several Fridays working there with Alexis the summer before. After I'd first shifted, Alexis taught me to use and control my ability to call animal forms. It had been convenient for us both to do it here. Making my way down the hall, I looked into each of the 2 exam rooms as I passed them. I didn't hear any movement in the building. I suspected that they weren't here. Reaching the old kitchen that was now used as a break and storage room, I found it empty. No one here? Gavin asked. Looks like it. They're probably in the main house. It is lunchtime after all. Did you notice if Caden's truck was parked in the front? It is. I'll check the last room just to be sure, but you're probably right. If we had been looking for anyone else, our noses would have told us if they were there, but Alexis and Gavin spend enough time in the clinic that their scents were everywhere. Without waiting for Gavin to check the last room, I retraced our steps, heading back out of the clinic. Turning away from the gate we'd come through, I headed for the back door to the house. As I started up the steps onto the deck, Gavin came up behind me, following without a word. I knocked on the back door and waited. After a few moments, Caden answered, and seeing that it wasn't someone needing help or a threat to his charge, let us inside. Nickie's here. He called back to the harmonia. Let her in. I heard her voice come from the next room. I am. Caden motioned toward the kitchen and closed the door behind us. We're just getting some lunch. I stepped through the laundry room door into the kitchen and found my friend sitting at the bar, a sandwich in her hand. Hey, I said. How are you today? Good, she said, setting her sandwich on the paper plate in front of her. What brings you out this way today? I leaned on my elbows on the counter facing her. I had someone come to see me a couple days ago, and I'm gonna need your help. She looked intrigued. Tell me. She picked her sandwich back up and continued to eat while I explained to her about the Guidry twins. When are we gonna do this? I'm not sure yet. Devon and Bill are working on getting it set up, but I wanted to check in with you and see if you had any time you weren't able to do it. I don't think so, but I'll. Her words were drowned out by the thunder of a fist beating a frantic rhythm against the back door. We all turned, but Caden moved first. He disappeared through the door to the laundry room, and I heard indistinct voices for a moment. Then he reappeared. "We've got an injury that needs your attention, ma'am." He looked at Alexis. "They've got her in the clinic." "Who is it?" She put her sandwich down and stood. "Don't know." "How bad is it?" From how panicked Levi was, I'd say pretty bad. Alexis picked up her pace, making her way to the door a little faster than a moment before. "Need any help?" I offered. "Couldn't hurt, come on out," she said without stopping. Caden and Gavin followed, and the closer we got, the faster we moved. By the time we hit the door of the clinic, we were almost at a run. We burst inside, Alexis in the lead, then myself, Caden, and Gavin. In the first exam room, we found man standing beside the exam table, his hands hovering over the woman laying limp on the table, as if trying to figure out what to do. She was covered in so much blood, it was hard to tell much about her. I knew from her scent that she was wolf and pack, though the pack scent was light, almost fresh, as if it hadn't been there long. "Who is she?" Alexis asked as she moved around the table, taking a good look at the mangled body. "Not sure exactly, I found her like this on the side of Bryce Road." The man said. "Levi, I presumed." Caden, grab her feet. "She's got several broken bones, we've got to set them before they heal this way." Alexis glanced at me. "Can you get on the other side of the table and help me?" I knew Caden's touch would keep her from feeling much pain. That was one of his talents. "No problem." I moved to the other side of the table and tried to make sense of the mess in between us. Both arms were bent at odd angles as well as one leg, but I could still tell that the woman between us wasn't small. I guessed somewhere near 6 feet. "Here, hold on right here." I let Alexis place my hands where she needed them. "Hold on tight, I'm going to have to pull against it to set this break." "Got it." I braced myself and didn't let the upper arm move as the healer pulled on her wrist, twisting as she went. The bones snapped and popped as they slid into place. "Gavin, look in the cabinets behind me for splints and gauze, put it on that tray and set it close, then get more from the other exam room." She quickly immobilized the newly set arm and wrapped it with a few swift movements before moving to the next injury. The man who brought in the woman we were working on stood to one side and watched, almost in shock. Alexis and I set the woman's other arm, and while she wrapped it, I glanced up at the man. He was pale and looked like he was about to pass out. "Gavin." I nodded in the man's direction. His eyes followed my movement and instantly understood what I meant. "Got it." He moved towards him. "Why don't you come in the other room with me, give them more room to work." He led the man from the room, and I heard them move towards the front of the building to the waiting room. "Let's shift around here," Alexis's voice brought me back to what we were doing. "Caden, move up next to her head, I need to take a look at that leg." He moved up to cup her head, it looked almost small between his large hands. "This one's bad." Alexis was talking as much to herself as anyone else. We could see it was bad. Both ends of the bone in the woman's thigh were sticking out too of the skin. The sharp pieces looked like jagged knives threatening to stab anyone not careful enough. I waited, knowing she wasn't ready for me yet, and she'd tell me when she was. "All right," she said after a moment. "I need you to take hold of her calf just below the knee and slowly pull." Slowly. We have to be careful we don't cut or pinch her femoral artery while we're at it. How are we going to do that? I moved to grip the woman's leg in both hands, waiting to pull until I had an answer. Very carefully. That wasn't the answer I was looking for. Not really seeing any other option, I started tugging on the leg. Bones slid against each other, it felt like I was rubbing two pieces of sandpaper together. Alexis kept one hand on the woman's hip and used the other to help guide the muscle and bone where she wanted it. Her eyes were closed, but I knew she wasn't doing it all by feel. She was using her other sight, looking inside the woman's body and watching what we were doing as things moved. Beneath my hands, the bones popped and the leg looked almost normal now, aside from the bleeding wounds on one side. Stop, hold it just like that. Alexis reached for another splint and quickly bound the leg both above and below the wound, holding it in place. All right. Alexis took a deep breath and moved back up the woman's body, holding her hands a couple inches over the skin. I knew she was checking for other injuries, things inside that we couldn't see. She's got some internal bleeding and a couple of cracked ribs, but nothing like her arms or leg. She moved up the woman's neck and held one hand over her face and head. And a concussion. So what do we do? I asked. She needs to be shifted, but carefully. I can call her Wolf if you'd like. That would let you keep an eye on how she's doing, maybe guide the healing without draining you. That would be great. Thanks. You ready? I watched Alexis's face, waiting for her reply. Do it. I glanced at Caden, waiting for his nod before closing my eyes and reaching inside myself for that part that let me feel the other woman's animal form. I pushed that piece of me into her, reaching, feeling for the shadow of her wolf. It took me several long seconds to find it. It was curled deep inside her, huddling as if scared or hurt. I tried to coax it forward, to get it to come to the surface on its own. Giving up, I had no other option but to dig my power in, to grab the wolf by the fur on the back of the neck and yank it forward, forcing the change over her body in a sudden wash of heat. Wow. Caden said, his hands suddenly empty. Sorry. I hadn't wanted to force it, but I'd had no choice. It's okay, she's doing much better, Alexis said. Can you push the wolf back again? No problem. I braced myself, preparing for another fight, but the woman's wolf seemed to be done fighting. As soon as I reached my power towards it, the wolf retreated and her body blurred for a moment before once more transforming into a tall human body. She was still wounded and her lack of clothing was glaringly obvious, but most of the blood had disappeared with the shifts. The lack of blood obscuring her skin revealed dark bruises and a multitude of small cuts, but the larger injuries seemed to be mostly healed. The jagged wound on her thigh was already scabbed over and looked days, if not a week or two old. We need to get her into the back room. I knew she meant the only room in the transformed guest house that still looked like a bedroom. She'll be waking up soon, and laying here half naked and surrounded by strangers won't put her at ease. I'll go get things ready and send Gavin back with a blanket. Caden needs to stay with her for now to help with the pain. I don't want to leave him alone, in case she wakes up and panics about being alone and naked with an unknown man. You all right staying with them? She looked at me a moment. It's fine. I took the time to get my first really good look at the woman on the table. She was somewhere near my age by my guess, and pretty. You don't know her? I looked up at Caden. Nope, she must be new to the area, he said. Her short, curly orange hair was a surprising color. I didn't know if it was from a bottle or natural, but either way it was eye-catching. Her eyes opened, slightly at first, then wide in panic. You're all right, you're in the pack clinic, I said in a rush, but I kept my voice soft as I tried to keep her calm. Someone found you hurt and brought you in. We've set several broken bones, and you've done a lot of healing, I said. The panic in her eyes seemed to fade, until Gavin appeared in the doorway, a lightweight blanket in one hand. She scrambled back, then stopped, realizing for the first time that Caden's hands were still on her head. Her eyes went wide again, and I scented her fear. It's all right. This is Gavin, he's my bodyguard. He was just bringing us a blanket, so Caden and I could move you into the other room. I held out my hand toward Gavin for the blanket. He gave it to me, then backed out of the room. Behind you is Caden. He's been touching you, first your ankles, then your head, since you came in. He's been controlling your pain. It let us set your bones without you waking up screaming. I continued to speak in a calm, soft voice as I moved, slowly unfolding the blanket, then moving forward to cover her with it. I've shifted you to wolf and back again, but you still have a lot of healing to do. We're gonna move you to another room, one with a real bed. Once Alexis, she's our Harmonia and the pack healer, says you're well enough, you can shower in there too. As Gavin left and I covered her, the woman's panic seemed to fade. Can you tell me your name? B. Bailey Peters. She stammered at first but then looked away from Caden, still towering over her, and focused on me. Okay Bailey, my name is Nickie Wilson, and the man above you is Caden Bradley. He's gonna carry you into the other room, all right? She looked at him, then back to me, hesitated a moment, then nodded. Caden tucked the blanket around her, then picked her up, one arm around her shoulders and the other under her knees. I led the way out of the room, then stepped out of the way for Caden to take Bailey into the bedroom, following behind once they'd gone past. I stepped into the bedroom as Caden settled her onto the queen-sized bed and stepped back to stand beside the door, his hands clasped behind his back, but staying close in case he was needed. Bailey, this is Alexis. She's our Harmonia as well as the pack healer. This clinic is her guest house. It's nice to meet you, Bailey. How are you feeling? Bailey blinked. Sore, tired. That's to be expected, you're still pretty bruised. I think we've taken care of the worst of your injuries, but I'd be more comfortable if you stayed here, at least for a few hours, so I can be sure. She paused a moment, looking down at her lap, then up again. I can do that. I've never met you before, so you must be new in town. How long have you been here, Bailey? Alexis asked, sitting on the edge of the bed opposite where Bailey lay. I got transferred in a couple of weeks ago. I've met the Anikitos and moved, that's about all I've had time for so far. Alexis nodded. That's fine. She watched the woman for just a moment. You're probably hungry. You burned a lot of energy between healing and shifting twice. I've got some meal replacement shakes in the kitchen, if you think you can drink one. That would be good, please. Alexis looked at Caden and tipped her head towards the kitchen. Caden looked at Gavin a moment, then to Alexis and back to Gavin for just a second. At Gavin's nod, Caden turned and headed down the hall. You said you transferred in, I take it you're with the mine? Alexis asked. Yeah. I assume, since you said you moved, you'll be staying? Bailey nodded. It will be nice to have some new blood around here. Caden came back with a pair of cans and handed them to the Harmonia. She shook one, popped the top open and handed it across the bed to Bailey. Have you met any of the pack yet? I asked, curious. She shook her head, still draining the can shake. Do you have any plans for the Super Bowl? She lowered the can and looked at me a second. When is it? This weekend? Next Sunday, Caden said. Not this one. She frowned for just a moment. No, I'm off, but I don't have anything planned. Why? I shrugged one shoulder. My husband and the Enforcer team are putting together a party at a ranch outside of town. It's gonna be a pack thing, and a good part of us should be there. There will be food, drink, and lots of new people to meet. You should come out. Her mate is the Theron. Alexis held out her hand for the empty can. You want another? She held up the still full can. Please. Bailey took the fresh shake from Alexis and turned back to me. I don't know. She tipped the can back and drained it as easily as the first, then set the empty can in her lap and stared at it. Come on out, it will be fun. There's still a lot of the pack I haven't met yet. It will be easier to have someone with me to help me remember names. I'm horrible with names. I tried for a friendly smile, hoping to put her at ease. Maybe I'll see. I don't even know where to go. Alexis looked at me a second. Ethan's ranch? Yep. I know where it is. She turned back Bailey. I'll give you directions before I send you home. I don't even know how I'll get home. Don't worry, we'll take care of that too. Alexis took the empty can, stood, and moved toward the bedroom door. I'm sure you're tired. Why don't you get some rest, and I'll check on you in a little while? The girl nodded. The energy seemed to drain from her pale face as she scooted to lay flat on the bed and pull the blanket up around her shoulders. Feel free to use the bathroom, take a shower when you're ready, and climb in bed if you'd like. There are some extra sweats in the dresser, too. You didn't have anything on when Levi brought you in. You mind if I ask what happened? Thanks again. No problem. Alexis smiled and left the room. I followed, and I knew Caden and Gavin were right behind us. Come on in here and have one of these shakes yourself. Alexis led me into the old kitchen. Caden stopped in the doorway. I'm going to go check on Levi, let him know how things are going. He's already gone, Gavin said, moving past him to join Alexis and me in the room. He left after I got him out of the way while they were setting bones. Said he had to get to work. All right, then I won't bother. Alexis pulled a couple of cold shakes from the refrigerator, while Caden grabbed several more from the cabinet. She brought me one, and we sat together at the small round table while Caden moved in front of the fridge and restocked what had been used. I quickly shook the can, popped the top, and took a drink. What's this about a party? She asked, shaking her a can for herself. It's Devon's idea. I didn't tell her about the need to get rid of the body. As part of the second most powerful couple in the pack, it was something she would find out about. I was sure she would have understood, but I didn't know how much the woman in the next room might overhear. He and the team are working on getting it all set up. How do you feel about a party? I shrugged both shoulders this time. It could be fun. It would be less so if I had to plan or set it up, but if I just have to show up, I can enjoy that. I grinned. She looked at me a moment, narrowing her eyes as she did so. Other than the party, how are you? I mean, really, how are you? I looked down at the can in my hand. I'm better. It's not the same and I'm not 100% yet, but I'm doing better. I gave her a small, vulnerable smile. She smiled back, not her usual friendly smile, but one that said she understood my pain. I'm glad to hear it. I wondered for the first time if perhaps Alexis had miscarried at some point in the past. Knowing firsthand how painful such a loss was, I wasn't going to ask. Nickie, your lunch hour is long since over, and since you missed lunch, that's not going to be enough. Gavin said, his tone apologetic. I glanced at the clock on the wall and was surprised to find it was well after 3 o'clock. Shit. Don't worry about the shop, he said. I sent messages to both Kathy and the Anikitos that you'd gotten hung up with pack business and may not make it back in today. Relieved, I gave him a smile. Thanks for that. I should probably at least call Bill, let him know what's up. I'll talk to him. Alexis said. You go get something to eat and get some rest. I'm going to check on our guest in a little while and do the same. If she's ready to go this evening, I'll either have Caden take her home or Hank and I will. I tipped the high-calorie shake up and drained the last of it in one long drink. All right. Thanks for the drink. No problem, I'm just glad you were here when she came in or I'd be totally exhausted. Having you here today really helped. No problem. If you need me in the future, just call. I said. I'll try to keep that in mind, she said. I will keep that in mind, Caden put in. You may regret the offer. No worries. You all have done so much for me, the least I can do is offer to help when you need it. Gavin and I made our way out to his pickup, and I let him take me home. The next morning, Alexis called me at the shop. It was before opening, and Gavin and I were the only two in the building. What are your plans for tonight? She asked after we exchanged greetings. None that I know of. Why? I thought we might have a girls' night. You and me? You, me, maybe Bailey. She's probably still a little sore, but she was well enough this morning. You heard her say she's new and doesn't know anyone. I figured we could use a new friend too. That sounds like fun. I looked at the door. I knew Gavin was on the other side. Mind if I invite someone else? Who? Rissa Whitaker, she's a clerk here at the shop. We've become friends. Sure, why not? When and where? I asked. Here, about 7 sound good to you? Sounds good to me. I'll talk to Rissa, see if she can make it. I'll let you know. That'll be great. I'll see you then? Great, Hank's got a meeting this evening, so come prepared to laugh, talk, and drink. All right, I'll see you tonight. I disconnected the call and sent a message to Devin. Alexis called, girls' night tonight, her place. Tell you more after work. I knew he'd want to know ahead of time, if only so he could make sure there was an enforcer available.